All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Today, we're doing the LexisNexis Early Data Analyzer webinar. I'm Jennifer Mediano. I'm the account executive for the channel covering the Litigation Service Bureau for the East Coast. I also have on the line Elaine Agama, who's the technical consultant for Law Pre-Discovery and Early Data Analyzer, who will be helping to dive us a little deeper into Early Data Analyzer. What we're going to do today, we're going to go ahead and go through why Early Data Analyzer, why have Litigation Service Bureau started to use it, what does that mean to your business. I'm also going to go through some of the new features because I know some people have seen Early Data Analyzer already, but as we've been releasing features relatively quickly with EDA, I want to make sure that you're aware of what the new features are that have been coming out. Next, we'll go through the demo of EDA. And Elaine will do that with us. And then we'll save some time at the end for some question and answers in case anyone has some questions at the end of the presentation. So why Early Data Analyzer? I think first and foremost, from a Litigation Service Bureau market perspective, what we never want to see happen is that a very large data set comes to your business and you have to turn it away. So Early Data Analyzer is a way to be able to handle the larger data sets. So it is an early data assessment tool. It's going to help you as early on in the process to gain insight into what the size and scope is of the data, for you to be able to communicate that with your clients, specifically the responsive data, before you're even starting the kind of time-consuming processing. So streamlining that data processing, giving you a chance to gain those insights faster. We're looking at about 5 to 10 gigabytes per core. So if you compare that to like what Law Pre-Discovery can do, we're looking at about 6 times faster speed, pushing it through Early Data Analyzer. The next big piece of it is allowing you to be more profitable by leveraging some of your existing resources. So EDA is built on 64-bit multi-threaded tools, so you're able to do a lot more with less. And then the next big piece is to provide some of those real-time insights, viewing some summaries of what's been included or excluded, some of the reporting features, and then also being able to perform some keyword and context searches of documents. And again, all of this is being done before you've even moved any data. So what we're doing with Early Data Analyzer, you're pointing to the data instead of moving it. So at the point when you've done this calling and you've done the searching and you've kind of done this initial scope, then we're moving into Law Pre-Discovery or going from Early Data Analyzer into a review tool and then back to Law Pre-Discovery production. The next is increasing your bandwidth by decreasing the volume of data that needs to even be stored or processed or reviewed, freeing up a lot of time and space. And lastly, allowing client involvement with Web EDA, letting them go ahead and get a peek at the data at the outset. So where are the gaps in the data? Are they missing anything? And letting them be involved in the process. Some of the big features that came out with Early Data Analyzer with the desktop 1.6, so the ability to do the analysis with performing near dupe and email threading, and also to be able to export the email threads. The ability to detect compound documents and locate them via a search. Being able to see a gap analysis chart on a case level dashboard. And then also the ability to configure the OCR to start automatically after you're done the analysis. For the Early Data Analyzer web portion, we have now an Explore tab to be able to do some quick search and browse for some early case assessment. You can also view and tag the near duplicate and email threads via that same Explore interface. There's a modified content viewer that allows you the ability to show relationships for ease of browsing. And then lastly, we have statistical review to estimate document characteristics and also the ability to plan costs via that feature as well. So we're going to go ahead at this point to turn things over to Elaine Agama, who's our technical consultant, to start driving us through Early Data Analyzer. Feel free to ask questions. You can press *6 to unmute your line if you need to ask a question. And then also you can type one into the chat feature as well. Okay, Elaine.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. I'm Elaine. I'll be showing EDA today. Just want to make sure everybody can see my desktop here. Jen, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. All right, so as Jen mentioned, with a sort of high-level overview of EDA, it's a tool that simply allows us to search and call out the data where it currently resides. So that's whether on your disk or your C drive, it might be on a file server, or it could even be an external hard drive that someone may have handed to you. And really the benefit of this tool is that you're going to reduce the cost and the time associated with handling typically large electronic discovery production. So that's what we're going to show today, and we'll show you EDA desktop, and we'll also show the web interface towards the end. And if anybody has questions, let me know, and we'll be sure to address those questions as we go through the webinar. All right, so this is LexisNexis Early Data Analyzer, and I'm going to start by showing a couple of the initial configurations involved and what it takes to run this application. It does require a SQL server, and you can use SQL Express if that's a version that you have, but it does require one or the other. We have our home directory set up currently to my C drive, and of course you could point that out to your network. And then we also have a direct integration between EDA and law. So this case list here allows me to simply export either to an existing law case that I may have previously created, or decide whether I need to create a brand new law case for that particular export. And you'll see that all towards the sort of the end here. So I'm going to hit OK on the environment settings, create a new case, and we'll call this, just use today's date, webinar. All right, and as a law user, some of these settings may look familiar to you, and there are some functionalities or features that are available in both EDA and law. However, both applications were designed to do two different things. With EDA particularly, as I mentioned, we are going out to where the data is sitting, and we are extracting the content, the metadata, and bringing all that information back into EDA for you to review and potentially identify all of the responsive records that you're going to want to potentially bring into law pre-discovery for further production. So I'm going to go ahead and use the name description. I'll skip. Case directory will leave everything as is, and then again, SQL Express setup with my machine. In EDA, we can enable the deduplication mode either on a global or custodian level, and you'll see those two options here. For emails, there are a list of fields that we look at in addition to the body of the email to determine whether the records are exact duplicates or not. We also can run the index in EDA, which is this option here. This allows us to run full text searching, and that ranges anywhere from your very basic searches with a simple key term or word to the more advanced queries that you can also create. We use DT Search as a back-end searching engine in both EDA and law. So if you are familiar with those different syntaxes involved, you can apply those in EDA as well. We also have the ability to identify different languages during the analysis, and this is what this option is going to do for us. And as Jen touched on briefly earlier, we have implemented the near duplicate and the email threading options in EDA. So what we're going to do is actually enable those two options. Now, the results for near duplicate and email threading are not shown directly within EDA desktop, but that's something that I could show in the web interface. We can review the near duplicates in there, show you the differences between two records, and then also identify the different email threads that we've identified from the analysis. So moving on to the index settings, we have some advanced settings here, including, for instance, the accent sensitive, how you want to go about creating your index. And again, the index creates your dictionary files, which allows us to do full text searching in EDA. On the right side, you'll notice a list of fields that we are also going to index. You have the option to turn this off or choose a specific set of fields to index depending on really the direction of your project or where you're going with that specific case. We can OCR image-based records in EDA as well, and that's including PDF, PNGs, you might have records that are in TIFF format. If we have those types of files in the database, we will most likely flag them, and it'll show up in the OCR tab and allow you to OCR either on a document level or a group level. Now, there's two different OCR engines available in EDA, and that's the ABBY FineReader, which gives you a longer list of languages to select from. So this is really going to be handy if you're, for instance, dealing with a lot of foreign languages or Asian languages, such as Chinese, Japanese, Korean. And the next provision would be the default OCR engine, which supports a much shorter list of languages. So that's the biggest difference between the two. For password-protected files, you can input the passwords in the Passwords tab, and you can do this now or come back to it later if you don't have the password. But I could go in here and simply add a password if I have that information for a specific document that might be in the data set. And you can even import a list of passwords by going to my passwords text, examples of some of the different passwords I might have for the different files that I have, and I can import that into the passwords menu. Same concept with the tags. You can import a list or create your own tag names as you go through a project, and you don't have to set up all your tags now. You can create new tags throughout the project, but I'm going to go ahead and import a list of tags just to give you an idea on what some of these tag names might look like. And you could, just say responsive. Maybe you want another tag here. We'll call that non-responsive. Hit add, and then we'll hit OK to create the case. All right, so now that we've created the case, there's a few things to note here. Workflow standpoint, we start with the import or what's called the analysis stage. That's where we, again, go out to the source location of the data set, extract the content text, everything we can extract from there, bring it back into EDA for us to look at or review. And then we go through the different filters that are involved within this case or the application, and you'll see that all sort of take shape here. So I'm going to just jump into my EDA demo set. Use the Enron set 2013 and bring in, let's do some of these PST files. And you can see that I can drag and drop that into the lower left side of the screen, and then also drop the John Doe PST file and expand this. Now notice the status, the label, the input, meaning where is this data coming from? And you can see that this is directly from my desktop. So you have my username there, the full path, so we know exactly where we're going to extract the information from. And once I hit Start Import, you'll see the status at the bottom, and then also the status for each one of these folders change. So it's going to change from work pending to, it's going to start to inventory everything, and then you'll see it change to analyzing. And once that's done, I'll take you over to the case dashboard where we'll see a quick glimpse on everything we've analyzed. If there are any errors or warning messages, we can check that information from the exceptions tab. You can see that it's going through this PST file here specifically, and it tells us exactly how many records were yielded from that specific PST or folder. Now you can customize the custodian names. The default custodian names that are being used, if you don't name or select a custodian name, is going to be the folder name or the file name of that particular file. But if I wanted to say customize a custodian, I can simply hit add custodian, and we could call this I don't know, Bob Smith, for example. Hit save. And I can now drag files and folders into this orange box here to import data for Bob Smith. So if I wanted to take this law demo set, drop that into the queue, I can do that. Or I can also use this drop-down menu to add folders or files. And if I'd rather browse out to them, I can also do it that way instead of dragging and dropping. So we're going to go ahead and delete that custodian since we're just about done here. Now that we've completed the analysis, I'm going to jump into the case dashboard and show you a visual representation on the data we have just analyzed. We have your case summary, your status, were there any errors or exceptions, and then you have what's called the gap analysis. Now, this gap analysis here tells us exactly where the most activity occurred within a specific year. So you could see that, between 1981 of January all the way to maybe about 2000, there really wasn't much going on there. But if I zoom into, let's say, about January 2001 all the way to 2003, you can zoom in to really see how many records were, emails were being sent back and forth, or maybe eDocs that were created. You could see the exact count. So for June 2001, it's showing that I have 2,589 emails, and to determine the exact count for this category, we look at the date sent, particularly on these emails. So it's just telling me that I had those many emails that were sent out around that time. And then the blue, June 2001, indicating 0 eDocs. And for eDocs, we look at the date created and the date modified field. Right, I'm going to take you to the summary view. If I hover over eDocs, emails, attachments, it gives me the exact count of each one of these categories. And at the bottom here, you have the filters, sort of graphical view of what we're going to be doing in the filters tab. So right now, we haven't excluded anything, and that is the reason why everything is blue. But as you go through the different filters and the different categories in EDA, you're going to see this also take shape, and I can jump back in there later to show you that. The exceptions tab is something that you can also look at once the import's been completed. You can see that we've identified certain files, such as the .exe files, and these are the type of file that's never going to be relevant for production or for your case. So we could see that we have 23 .exe files. Maybe you ran into, let's say, some encrypted files. I don't have any here, but you're also able to reanalyze those records from the exceptions tab. The critical failures would be the more concerning or alarming ones, which we don't have, but this is a good way to also see whether a PST file was corrupt, for example, or maybe there was a permission-related issue that we ran into in the import stage. So that's the exceptions tab there. Jumping over to the filters tab, and really this is where you're going to probably spend quite a bit of time trying to identify which documents to include and which documents to exclude. So think of this sort of as a funnel image where you're going through each one of these categories, and the goal is to try and minimize or narrow down the records to the most relevant based on the different parameters or categories we have up here. So file hash filter, for instance, the missed items category identifies any of those system type of files. As I mentioned, .exes would be one of them, .dll, and you see some of those items in this category that we've identified. So we can easily say we're going to exclude all of those missed items because we're never going to use them. And the custom file hash item, this is a way of, if you've got, for instance, a corporate image and you want to go ahead and use specific hash values in comparison to the hash values of your data that you just analyzed, you can also use this option. Because in this item, we still have to go and download the NIST database from the website, and that database contains a list of different hash values that we use in comparison to see if that .dll exists or the .exe exists in the database somewhere. Notice at the bottom you also have the different tabs, duplicate document filter, date range, etc. And it's the same list that you have in the drop-down menu, just different ways of getting to that particular category. So under the duplicate document filter, we've identified that there are 89 documents that are duplicates in this case. I can select the duplicate. We can see the family count, which includes the attachments That's over 101 records. So as I go through each record, if that's something that I need to do as part of my workflow, I can definitely look at the content and say, okay, it looks like these are the duplicates. What do I want to do with these duplicates? And ideally, you'd want to exclude the duplicates from EDA. So we can go ahead and hit exclude, move on to the next filter, and that's the date range filter. Now, the date range filter works a little bit different from the rest of the filters because it's an inclusive filter. And what that means is that we're isolating a set of documents that fall within the two dates, the start date and the end date. So a good example, we'll just do 2000 and then all the way to 2001. Okay, you see the count significantly changed to 354 from the initial count of almost 7,500 records. So we've now narrowed down the emails that were sent between 2000 and 2001. And again, if you have eDocs, we look at the date created and the date modified fields. And to further review the content of these records, I can also, again, go back and see what the text looks like from here. I can even launch the source document. So if you have the native application for that particular file type, which in this case, this is a .msg, and I have Microsoft Outlook installed, I can go ahead and retrieve the native file. It's going to use Outlook to launch the record, and here it is. Went to my other screen. Now, you can document tag a particular record as well as a group tag. So if I wanted to tag this specific email and say it looks like this is a responsive email, I can do that by simply checking that box there. And earlier I mentioned that you can add the different tags as you go through a case. So in here, if I remembered, I forgot to create a tag called confidential, I can add that here. Hit OK, and you will see that show up within the list of tags that you have. And you can also do what's called group tagging, which will then tag all of the 354 records showing in here. And we could call this the date 2000, 2001 batch that I've included based on those two different dates. All right, so I'm going to delete the date range here and move on to the next filter, which is the file type filter. Typically, you'll see a longer list of different file types, but because majority or all of the items we brought in were PSP files, it's going to show a lot of those MSGs, which we have the most of. And then you've got those missed items that I mentioned earlier that we've already excluded. Now, the reason why these two items are still showing up is because the file type filter is designed to sort of recheck everything you've included or excluded, because if we show just the file type for the list of included items, there's no way to really tell if you've excluded something that you may end up needing because of its file type. So this is why in here you have the option to say, okay, never mind, I actually need to keep all of the text files and not exclude them. You could go through this, again, include, exclude, etc. Email center domain, you have the option here to go through each one of these domains and decide whether each domain will be included in the final export or not. And you could sort on the count to get a better idea on which domain showed up the most and which ones did not. So for instance, we have one email from Verizon.net. I can look at that and say this is maybe non-responsive. We don't care about that, and if we don't tag it, we could exclude it and say we don't need anything that came from that domain. There's also one, if I sort our name, I know there's one on ups.com. Ship notification, we do not need, so we could exclude that. So you'd sort of walk through the list of email domains here and decide whether to include or exclude some of these items. For now, we're just going to say include all. And then moving on to the language filter, which we've identified a few other ones in addition to, of course, English. We can go in and apply, a tag, for example, for French. So I can go in and say, let's tag all of the French documents, because this might be something that I need to export now and hand off to a translator. And if you're exporting directly to law pre-discovery, all of the tags that you're creating, if you're exporting based on that tag name, will also be brought over to law. So that would be a kind of good way to keep track of exactly which document went into law if you are bringing them over into an existing law case. All right, so I'm going to jump into the OCR piece in EDA. We have some of these different file types that we've identified without text or extracted text. If I launch a source document for this PDF to make sure there's something there and it's not an actual image, we know that there's some content there. So this is something we might want to queue up for OCR. And once I hit the queue document for OCR, it's going to OCR that particular record. Once I hit refresh, you now see the OCR text on the right side of the screen. And I can queue up everything else that's showing up on this list for OCR if that's something that you're needing to do to make sure that you've got everything. But ideally, you'd want to set it up so that you're only looking at everything that made it into your inclusion list, which is this filter documents only option, and then maybe going through the different file types. For instance, TIFF image, these might be photographs, or maybe the JPEGs. These are probably the photographs that we may not need to OCR. So that is the OCR stage in an EDA. I'm going to jump into the search, hit new, and run let's just do a John. We'll look for the search term John and hit save and search. And that came back exactly 62 documents that contains the word search. Now, notice the highlighted terms based on that search. If I hit next, it tells me exactly what I'm looking at or where within that record. And I continue to, of course, I can continue to look at the different records that that came back from that search. And this is how you would go about going into the next page, the third page, the fourth page, and so forth. And the same concept applies with document tagging. I can go in and tag maybe a particular document for whatever reason and say this is confidential. Or I can go ahead and apply a tag on all 62 records and hit tag searches. I could say this is my search number 1, tag those records, and maybe export those out if needed. Now, you can also import a list of search terms into EDA. So I can hit the import search terms. We're just going to go ahead and look for a search terms text file here that includes a longer list of search terms for this particular data set. Now you can see that I've imported 9 different search terms. And what's nice about EDA is that you can run all 9 searches simultaneously. You don't have to sit there and run, for example, the term Death Star, wait for the results, and then go to the next term, wait for the results, and so forth. You can run all 9. If I hit run searches here, it's going to show the status of pending, and we should see that all complete. Oh, there it is. So it's finished pretty fast. So, for example, let's look at the term wholesale. We see the 291 count. I can continue to tag these different results that if needed, and also look at the content or the text over on the right side. There are a few other options in the searching category in EDA. For example, you could add a search filter. Let's go back to the term John. If I wanted to narrow down my results so I would expect less than 62, and let's say we wanted to focus on a particular custodian, instead of searching across the entire database, I can tell EDA to search only from, the John Doe and the Scott Hendrickson custodian. So once I hit OK, and if I hit save and search, you'll see this icon of the filter applied, meaning we've applied some sort of filter to help narrow down that search. And it reduces from 62 to 19 because we now only search from those two specific custodians rather than all of the custodians. And there are other filters that you can apply. For example, import sessions. Sometimes you might do 5 different import sessions in one day, or maybe in a span of a week if you're not getting all of the data in the beginning. And you can always, of course I only have one import session here, but if you needed to search from a specific import session or a specific day, you can do that as well. And same applies for the tags, folders, files, and other searches. We have the option to also search from the different fields listed here that are available, and then we have what's called a dictionary or the lookup tool. So the word John I could type in and see right away the dot count and the hit count. Same with any other terms that you're looking for here. It gives you everything that's close to that search. Then you could also look through and append and create the different syntax here to apply into the search box or search window. All right, let's jump into the guided search. There is another tab here next to the searches tab called guided search. And what this does is if I have technology, since we have over 7,200 records that came up, I'm just going to uncheck everything but technologies. If I go to the guided search, EDA will break down those 70-58 documents into these different categories. So if I expand custodian, we know that 2,160 of those documents from the 70-58 came from the custodian, Susan Bailey. And then if I really needed more information as to what kind of file types or how many of each file type was in that result set, I can do that by selecting the file type option here. So it would be helpful in the sense of trying to a pretty good idea as to where all these records came from, because it breaks it down for you based on the different fields here. So it even has the from domain, the email addresses, import session, etc. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump over to the report. And you can see that there's different types of reports that you can render or print or save from EDA. I'm going to start with the search report, because this gives us a pretty good idea on, we just touched on the search report feature. I want to show what this would look like, broken down by the search terms as well as the custodians. And as I scroll down, you'll sort of notice here, John Doe custodian, and it gives you the entire list of every search term that we looked for. And then you have the count, the family count. So all the items that you're seeing here could be very useful if you need to maybe show a client exactly what search terms were used to identify those records. There's also another report called the Top 25 File Types report, which gives us a summary on the file types that was found within the case most, or that showed up the most, and that would be, of course, the emails in this case. This is something you could print or save. You could save into different formats, that's Excel or PDF. All right, and then we'll do one more. Let's do the document timeline report. This is going to look a little similar to what the case dashboard looked like. For this specific timeline, it gives this kind of, and I know it's pretty blurry, so I'm going to try to zoom in here, but you can see sort of what we saw in the gap analysis. Oh, zoomed in too fast there. Create the report one more time. Okay, so I wanted to get more towards the second page to give you guys an idea on what that would look like. So again, broken down by custodians, the emails, the number of eDocs, the total documents, percentage of custodian, and so forth. And as I go through the very bottom, it gives you the total grand total of everything that you have in here. So it's a nice summary of everything you've analyzed and dealt with throughout this case. All right, so I'm going to jump into the export. And earlier, as I mentioned, there are two different exports. That's either bringing the data over to law pre-discovery, which we'll do first. And then the second option will be to create what's called a native export. And for the native export, we support concordant DAT files and also an EDRM XML 1.0 load file. So for any applications that support both formats, you can bring those into for production or for review. So for this particular export, we're going to try to bring everything over to law and tell EDA to create a brand new case for us. You can see the export statistics, and there are two options as to how we would go about exporting these records, and that's either going to be based on the filtered documents, meaning everything that made it into my inclusion list. If you recall the different filters we touched on here, it's going to be everything that we've marked for inclusion. Or we can base our export on a tag field or tag fields potentially. So if I hit refresh here, and that's what we're going to use for this export, if you recall the date 2000, 2001 I've tagged and also tagged everything that came back from the search term John, I can export based on these different tagged records. So we're going to export everything that was tagged under search number 1. It gives me the family count, and again, that's the total with the attachments. Under target law case, you can see the different law cases I've created previously, or if I select default law case, I can tell EDA to create a brand new law case for me. So we're going to queue up this export set, show you how the direct integration works coming from EDA over into law, and then from there I'll go back and do the second export, which is the native export. So I'm going to hit send to law. Gives me a count on all the documents here that we have gathered. And by the time we get to law, you'll see the electronic discovery loader come up, and at this point we're now utilizing a license from law pre-discovery, and we are now in law pre-discovery. So bring everything over for us, so load it up into our source queue. Once I hit start, hit OK, I'm going to then import and physically make copies of these documents into my law case directory. So you'll see that happen. And once I hit exit, I can go into law, open the case, and then maybe start TIFFing or start my QC process. And that's how the export works from EDA over to law. All right, I'm going to jump back and create a second export called the native export, and we'll just call this native. Hit done. You'll see different settings or options that you didn't see in the law export, such as the field selections or the output format that I mentioned earlier. So what we're going to do is create a, we'll just say an output EDRM 1.0. We have the option to select the different available fields for export, so I can say let's remove all and maybe only focus on your standard to from attach CC. We're just going to select a few here, maybe the custodian name, and let's do start. Subject, BCC, author. So you can kind of see there's a different sort of field available in here that you can create for your export or your load file. So I've selected a list of fields. We're going to hit OK. It's going to show that we've selected 10 of those fields. We're going to create the output directory, and we can point this out to my desktop. So if we do desktop, create a separate folder there, and I'll just call this EDA Export for now. All right. Now the Outlook format for MSG files, you have the HTML or the MHTML options. If you want or if you need to convert these MSG files into HTML format, for example, you can do that. And we'll go ahead and create that output for you rather than the .msgs. We'll do .msgs for this particular export. And then under documents to export, it's the same concept. We're going to base everything or the export either on what we've filtered, which, this time I could hit start export, pressing no, yes, and we could see the count change. So this time, instead of exporting based on a tag field, I am telling EDA to export everything based on what I've included. Once that's done, you'll see everything in the export folder. So once that's done, let me wait for this part to finish up. You could also hit the Show All button here to get an idea on what it is that you're exporting. All right. So step 2 out of 3, I'm going to try and export all those records and notice the count here. And this actually could take a little bit of time since I didn't do too much filtering. I've included many of those records. So let's actually hit cancel. I don't want to have to sit through and then just jump back to my filter here. And we are going to do an export on 2001. So that is a much smaller set, 2002. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do that. See if I could queue up the export here. And I can always go to my global dashboard to check the exact status. And this could be particularly handy if you are using multiple EDA machines, or maybe there's different users accessing the same case, or maybe everyone's accessing a different case. You can sort of keep track of, which machine is online or which machine is doing what. And the export here, this gives us an idea on how many total agents are running for the export. And an agent is equivalent to one processing core. So the performance you're going to get in EDA is going to be based on also the hardware resources or your hardware specs. And so I just wanted to point that out quickly here. Let's go back and see where we're at with the export. It's taking quite a bit of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into sort of a different direction here. And I'm going to do my export based on a tag set rather than the filtered set. Since there were too many documents that still fell within the inclusion list, we're going to go ahead and export. Okay, so now the date 2000-2001 bid reduce simply because it's now only looking at, I've added this inclusion here. So I'm going to get rid of that. Go back to my export, hit refresh here. I'm going to give it a few seconds. Okay. We're going to do the export based on the 2000-2001 search results. And again, this time we are creating a native export rather than a law export. So we're going to see that here. Hit start export. And that should finish up here shortly. All right, so in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and, since we've got about 10 minutes left, I'm going to try to jump into EDA Web while we wait for that to finish. So that export is done. I can go to my output folder to show you the output for that particular set. And again, that's based on the date 2000-2001 field. You have your native EDRM XML file here, which we'll launch to show. All right, looks like it's taking its time. So while that's loading, I'm going to go into some of these folders so you can see what the folder structure looks like from the output. You have your native file that we've exported. Anything with the NTV lets us know that that is the native file. And then also you have your text files, and that would be the corresponding text with those specific MSG or that email. So for example, this MSG file here is an email, and then you have the text as well, corresponding text for that email, which is right here. So we'll close out of there, minimize EDA desktop for now, and while we wait, that may not load just yet. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the web interface of EDA. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as myself. Okay, give me just a second to figure out the login information here. Okay, and there's the EDRM XML load file. That took a little bit of time to load, but that's what it would look like if you are selecting that particular format. Just about ready to show the EDA web here. I think I recently changed my password, so I can't. Okay, give me 1 second. All right, so quick overview on the EDA web is that this was designed mainly for from a review standpoint. So what that means is someone could go into EDA desktop, do all the work here, process, import, search, maybe do the filtering, etc. And someone else from a different office might want to see what was done in terms of searching or filtering. Or maybe you need to give your client access to a specific database. This is another great way to do that. And the setup entails configuration of the IIF manager, which is typically done by someone from your IT department. Once that's all set up, you would just go in and as the admin, you could create different usernames and passwords to hand off to other individuals that's going to be accessing your EDA cases. So I'm going to go ahead and log in and hope that this password here works. I think this is the one. All right, so that did work. Just going to re-log in since my browser is telling me that we have to re-log in here. And okay, let's use a different browser for this demo. All right, so if you remember, the case title was the 10-15-14 webinar, and because I have everything set up on this particular machine, I did set up IIF, it's configured with EDA Web. I can now access, close this window here. I can now access that specific case through the web. So once I hit open on this webinar here, you'll see the same type of information that we already saw, the dashboard, the count. Sorry about that. It keeps logging me out. Go to the webinar, the different filters that we've applied. If you remember the NIST item, filter analysis, which is something that I can also look at in EDA Web. We don't have this from the desktop version, but this is more of a way to continue what you are doing under filters. So anything here that we did not decide on, for example, I think it was the file, no, let's do email sender domain. You'll notice some of these, I'm just going to uncheck quickly some of these domains here. So if I left some of these items or email domains blank and said, okay, I'm not exactly sure if I need to include that or exclude that just yet, when I go to filter analysis and go to email sender domain, it'll tell me the actual domains that I did not decide on. So it sort of forces you to say, hey, you need to make a decision. You know, do you need to look at the documents? And you could review it in a way where it's much easier to look at, I guess, in this view rather than looking at the desktop version. So you could go through an email, the next document from that specific domain, and then decide, okay, maybe I do need to exclude everything from there. And it sort of takes you through this graphical view with the different domains involved, the count. And again, I can look through this document and decide, okay, we need to include that. Let's also include everything from BW legal, et cetera, and you sort of go through it until you finish or until you get to the very last domain that you did decide on from the filters. And then it'll give you this message saying you've completed everything. Same with language. So let's say we're going to include English, French, Latin. We'll exclude everything from unknown, and then we'll say complete. And I think file type, we're just going to include everything. So once I hit refresh here, you'll see that we've pretty much done everything we could do in the filters. Now, note that there's no import or export or report tab in here because you cannot bring additional data or bring new data into EDA Web or export anything from the web version. All of that has to be done from the desktop version. And then the searching will give you the list of everything that I ran through from the desktop version, so you could see that from the tagging to the filtering that I've applied. Under Explore, I can go through and say search for the word wholesale. Hit search. And here I have the view of the email threads and the near duplicates that were found specifically from this search. So if I want to review, for instance, the near duplicates, that's 100%, or maybe the different emails from a specific email chain or an email thread, I can do that here. There's also this option at the top to view the email thread in a separate view. So with the red dot indicating this is inclusive, meaning I don't need to review this email or that email. To me, they look like actual duplicates. So it's just going to tell you exactly which one of these emails are inclusive, meaning that's the email you want to look at because it's going to include any subsequent replies or forwards or any of the contents that were found in the other emails from that chain. And then as far as the near duplicates go, let's see if we could find a good example here. It's 100% similar. This is by percentage. So if you see anything that's, of course, under 100 and you want to see exactly what's different about those, so this one might be a good one, 96%. This is what we're going to compare this record against. If I hit compare, it'll tell me exactly what's different from this email, what changed, what was deleted, what remained the same. This is it's called the diff viewer in the EDA Web. All right, and then the last option being the statistical review. This is where we simply take a subset of your documents to review and determine whether each one of those documents are going to be responsive, privileged, or maybe confidential. So I'm going to jump into a different case quickly for that portion to show you everything I've done. I've created different types of statistical reviews. So this can be used for a couple of different reasons. Demo set A, if I go into review and I'm at 2% progress, I went ahead and told EDA to take a subset of everything in my case. So again, it's random sampling, so it just takes 357 out of the 7,000 plus records, and it'll tell me whether, just based on looking at the content, I can decide if this is going to be responsive or not. And I would click through every record just like this. No, it's not responsive. Yes, yes. Or maybe this is privileged, or maybe I need to skip. I don't know. You sort of go through this process of reviewing it so that in the end, you have a pretty good idea on how many of these records exactly are going to be responsive, and maybe you also identify the percentage of the privilege records in here. So if I go back to my review, review test, once that's all said and done, you'll see something that looks like this, 100% completed, and then based on the set that we ran through all documents, we've determined that 532 to 1288 records are responsive, and then 544, 0 to 544 out of the 7569 are determined to be privileged. And that's sort of the overview of the statistical review in EDA. And then the last piece here would be the creation of users, or the different credentials that you could set up for different people. Currently, you are able to set up either admin accounts, and I do apologize for that. I don't know why that keeps popping up here. You could set up different accounts and give either full access or read-write only. So that's what I was trying to show here, is that as a user, I've set up, for instance, Jane Doe and John Doe. They have limited rights, and you could assign specific cases for that specific individual. So if you have client A that's needing to access, specific case, and you've got a million cases in there, you can definitely go in and just create a user for that person and assign a specific case. If I go into clients here, see if we have any. Admin 1, for example, I can, set this up so that I can create, again, the specific username, generate a password for that person, and send that out to them. And that is really EDA Web and also EDA Desktop. So are there any questions? And if there aren't any questions at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and reach out to us if you do have any other questions.